Good afternoon. I'm Kay Livingston and I'm from the University of Glasgow in Scotland. I've been asked to address how does research and inquiry contribute to the professional development of teachers. In addressing this question, I'm going to talk about the context for professional development of teachers in Scotland. Before I begin, it's important to say that the current provision of teacher professional development in Scotland is influenced both by what has gone before and by more recent reviews of teacher education. In this short presentation, I'm only able to give you a snapshot of the context that emphasises teachers engaging in research and inquiry, as this has come about over time and it's been driven by various policy and practice initiatives. There are limitations to only giving you this snapshot, as it's only part of the context that's led to the emphasis on research and inquiry as professional development in Scotland. That said, I've had to make a selection of the particular context to address. And I'm going to start by talking about a review of teacher education that was carried out by Graham Donaldson, who is a former Chief Inspector in Scotland. This particular report carried out a comprehensive review of teacher education, from initial teacher education all the way through to career-long professional learning. And as part of this review, Graham Donaldson commissioned a review of international literature in relation to teacher education. And from that literature, he noted that the most successful education systems invest in developing their teachers as reflective, accomplished, and inquiring professionals. So the teacher is a professional rather than someone who is a technician delivering the curriculum. It's about teachers who have the capacity to engage fully with the complexities of education and to be key actors in shaping and leading change. And what he said was, if we are to have an aspiration of teachers in Scotland being able to engage in educational improvements, then they needed to develop expertise in using research, inquiry, and reflection as part of their daily skill set. He made 50 recommendations in his report, but I'm only going to share a few with you. Recommendation 1, he said the education policy should support the creation of a reinvigorated approach to 21st century professionalism. And you see the link between the sense of teachers as professionals and having a number of capacities, irrespective of their career stage, but including to engage directly with well-researched innovation. Another recommendation I want to draw your attention to is the professional standard in relation to creating an overarching framework of professional standards for teachers. And this overarching framework should reflect a reconceptualised model of teacher professionalism. So you can see the strong link between research and inquiry and also that sense of teachers as professionals. The General Teaching Council of Scotland is the council that sets the professional standards, and all teachers in Scotland have to be registered with the council in order to teach. And from that review of teacher education, the standards were revised through consultation with teachers and other key educational stakeholders. And indeed, a coherent framework, an overarching framework, developed through a suite of standards. And the first standard, which is the standard for all teachers to be registered with, for newly qualified teachers, these are mandatory standards. There's not much in Scottish education that's mandatory, but the standard for registration is mandatory. And then there is a standard for career-long professional learning, and there's standards for leadership and management. But what's important for this presentation is that research and inquiry is embedded in all the standard documents. And again, I can only give you a few short examples, but in relation to the standards for registration, that are the mandatory standards that apply to all newly qualified teachers, then the standard around research and inquiry says that all teachers should have knowledge and understanding of the importance of research and engagement in professional inquiry. And the kinds of professional actions that are expected are about knowing how to access and apply relevant findings from educational research, know how to engage critically in inquiry, research and evaluation, either as an individual teacher or collaboratively with colleagues, and be able to apply this in order to improve teaching and learning. In the next standard, this is the career-long professional learning standard, so in effect all teachers who are in service. While this is an aspirational standard, it is also the inquiry and research are embedded in there, and the sense of teachers' expectation to continue to develop their expertise and to engage in practitioner inquiry, and being able to participate and collaborate with colleagues to share the findings with one another throughout the school. So what are the kinds of expectations then of teachers if we draw from the review in terms of the recommendations and also from seeing inquiry and research embedded within the standards? It's about them taking responsibility for their own professional learning through that inquiring and questioning approach, not just waiting for professional development to be set up for them. It's also about continually thinking about and improving their own professional development throughout their career. And it's about engaging in self-reflection, self-assessment in terms of inquiring into what's going on in their classroom and in their school. And that is about a questioning approach, questioning the learning and teaching in their own classroom, gathering evidence and analysing that evidence, rather than relying on an assumption of thinking you know what's going on in the classroom or thinking you know what's going on in relation to the progress of pupils, being able to make informed decisions because there is evidence to support the kind of professional judgments that you're making in terms of decisions about next steps in learning and teaching. And also the expectation around engaging with research and continuing to engage with research and being able to question it, not just accepting the research, but thinking about, is it feasible? How does that relate to what goes on in my classroom? Is there anything I can learn from it? What was the context that that particular piece of research was carried out in? However, we know that what's written in policy documents, what's written in guidance documents, can feel as if it's a long way from the classrooms and from the day-to-day practice of teachers. So what does research and inquiry mean for teachers? And if we consider all of the aspects that we've seen in the standards, what does engaging with research and research literature actually mean for those working in the classroom? Is it about engaging in research, so part of a research project, conducting a research project? Does it mean engaging in a practitioner inquiry? And the word there that is is it a project where it's seen to stand alone somehow with a starting point and an end point that might last over 4 weeks, and that would be the end of that particular inquiry? Or is it about an inquiring practitioner, where there's that sense of ongoing inquiry into what you're doing in your classroom? Or is it all of the above? And certainly what you've seen in relation to the standards and the review of teacher education, you can see that there is some expectations around all of these aspects. And so let's just think a bit more about what research might mean and what inquiry might mean. And I want to draw on the literature here in terms of thinking about these concepts, because it is confusing for teachers in relation to should it be research, should it be inquiry. The concepts are not new in education. John Dewey, as far back as 1904, talked about the importance of teachers engaging in pedagogic inquiry to fully engage with the processes and outcomes in their classroom. More recently in the UK, Lawrence Stenhouse, he talked about the importance of teachers as researchers, learning through systematic inquiry, and how he described systematic inquiry was about a thoughtful study of educational problems, so a purposeful study, if you like. And he made the distinction between inquiry and research by saying that systematic inquiry becomes research when it's made public. So that sense of it being published somewhere, either in an article or in a conference paper or shared somehow through dissemination. And he said that the reported inquiry resulting in a contribution to knowledge, soundly based and in some way offering something new knowledge. But he also talked about developing an inquiring habit of thought. So that sense of always questioning practice in terms of what's going on in the classroom and education more generally, and recognising our classrooms as laboratories of learning for teachers as well as pupils, somewhere where teachers are also learning. And it was called Marlon Cochrane Smith that called this inquiry as a stance, that sense of a sustained way of being for teachers in their day-to-day practice. So bearing all of that in mind, let's now turn to looking at some concrete examples of the kinds of opportunities for teachers in Scotland to develop the knowledge, skills and confidence in research and inquiry. And you've had a sense of the continuum of professional learning that's expected in Scotland, and the sense of research and inquiry starts right from the initial teacher education phase, where a foundation of research and inquiry is built into the courses, and all student teachers engage in planning and designing practitioner inquiry and engaging with research. And to give you an example of that, in the phase of their school experience, the university tutors and teachers in school work together with a group of students, and where the particular educational issues or problems that have arisen during the school experience are then inquired into through joint discussion of that particular issue. So it's a concrete issue that's arisen during their practice or issues. They then look at research literature related to that particular issue, and it stimulates the sense of challenging not only what's going on in practice, but some of the challenges in relation to the literature. And the aim is to build a strong foundation for them as future teachers to get into the habit of practitioner inquiry, as well as reading and asking questions of the literature as part of their career-long professional learning. And there is opportunities for them to continue this learning in relation to accessing research literature as they move into the career-long professional learning phase. The free access to literature is provided by the General Teaching Council. So we know that for some it's challenging to be able to access literature after they've left the university sector, and it takes time to try and find the literature to access the journals. So to make it easy, they're able to access the research journals through their own registration through the General Teaching Council. The General Teaching Council also provide professional recognition for teachers who engage in practitioner inquiry, and there is also an educational hub made available through the General Teaching Council, so teachers can come together to share their findings, to be able to find space where they can come together in a digital space to review and read and discuss research articles. So the option is there for them to be able to come together in that way to continue their professional learning around research and inquiry. Another recommendation that Graham Donaldson made in the Teaching Scotland's Future report was about advanced study as part of enhanced teacher professionalism. He stopped short at an all-masters career or profession, although we're moving in that direction. But all in-service teachers are able to apply for funded master's level courses. And these teachers engage in practitioner inquiry as part of their programme. And what I want to do is to give you two examples of teachers who engaged in practitioner inquiry in this way. Olivia, and that's a pseudonym, not her actual name. Olivia is a teacher who has 5 years experience. She's working with primary 7, 11 to 12-year-old pupils. And the particular inquiry problem that was arising in her own classroom was the readers were disengaged, and there was a general feeling of disengagement with the reading that they were being given in the classroom. And so she explored alternative texts by looking at the research literature and studies that had already been done in that area, along with looking at theories of motivation. She then set about gathering evidence from her own class, so asking questions of why they were disengaged, why they felt weren't able to be motivated by the reading that they were being offered, both in school, and why they weren't engaging in reading after school. And as part of that process, she involved the pupils in discussion between her and them, a discussion with themselves, and she also had some discussion with the parents and recorded these discussions so that she could then analyse the responses and try and understand more about what was going on. The kinds of changes that it led to, because the pupils had been involved, they then started bringing in examples of alternative texts that they were interested in, and it got them reading these texts. It extended her own knowledge of what was available and what possibilities there were around alternative texts, and it also gave her some further knowledge about different possible motivation strategies for disengaged learners. Lucas is a teacher with 8 years experience. He works in secondary schools. He works with a group of pupils that are 13 to 16 years of age, and these pupils have experienced a trauma of some sort in their lives, and the ongoing teaching and learning problem that he was experiencing was the changing behaviour of the pupils in terms of their variable concentration, and also their interest in learning from day to day changed. And he started by asking questions of his own practice. How could his teaching be adapted in some way and more flexible to be applied to the changing and differences in the pupils from day to day around their behaviour and their concentration? How could he change the learning environment so that that would become more adaptable and it was easier for him to adapt to the ongoing changes? He also asked questions of the pupils' behaviour. So he engaged with them in terms of one-to-one dialogue, asking them about their own patterns of behaviour changes and observing them as they were at work. He had another teacher who came to support him in that, and he was able to observe any particular triggers that led to a behaviour change. The focused observations that he did allowed him to be able to evidence jointly the changing behaviour. So again, he involved the pupils in what he was doing and what he was looking for, and they themselves were able to say when a stressful incident or a particular emotion had changed their behaviour. And this led him to see how he could, on an ongoing basis, try to adapt his practice when these incidents occurred, and had a new understanding of the specific activities that had been agreed with pupils that he would then use when they were experiencing some emotional upset. He extended his professional development in relation to children, young children experiencing trauma, and it also gave him confidence in adapting his practice not only with these pupils but with the pupils more generally. So then, in terms of the challenges that were arising for these teachers in service, the kinds of things that they were saying were about how difficult they actually found from moving from identifying a topic like recognising disengaged readers, but how did they then prioritise how they were going to look at it? How did they decide on the key questions? And then the sense of how did they develop the skills that are necessary in order to decide on the method that they're going to choose? How would they engage with the literature, and how would they find the particular journal, and why would they look at one journal rather than another? How did they go about the search process? And a question that repeatedly comes up from teachers is, how do I actually know what counts as evidence? How will I know that my evidence is valid? How will anybody be interested in listening to these findings that I've collected? Knowing also how to gather the evidence, what's the best approach to get at the kinds of evidence that will help me address the inquiry question that I've come up with. And then once I've got this evidence, what do I do with it to help me to change my practice? So there's lots of questions, and actually identifying some of the challenges becomes an inquiry in itself of the teachers identifying the kinds of areas that they still feel that they need to develop in order to engage in research and practice. So I don't want to finish on challenges, and just to share with you that some of this work I've been doing on an international basis with colleagues from across a number of European countries, and it's been bringing together teachers, researchers and policymakers so that we can think about educational issues in a more collaborative way in order to build the professional development of everybody that's involved. And so in some cases it's also brought together pupils and parents in looking at a particular research issue around the development of educational challenges. And I call that a research and development project, because while we're engaging in research, our aim is to develop a particular learning and teaching area. We come together in what we call dialogue labs, so the different perspectives from teachers, from researchers, from policymakers come together to look at a particular topic. And so what's happening, we're trying to understand that topic from very different perspectives, and it provides an opportunity for professional learning from everybody involved. This has been called, more recently, close to practice research. That name was brought to the fore by the British Educational Research Association, and they define it as issues that are defined by practitioners as relevant to their practice and involves collaboration between people whose main expertise is in research, practice, or both. And what I see as being so important here is that it's a bottom-up approach where the actual educational issue is identified by the practitioners, often in communication with the research, but then together they're able to explore it. And Lawrence Stenhouse drew attention to the knowledge of the research results shouldn't be detached from understanding the process. And this close to practice research possibility means that the process of engaging in research that leads to the findings is done in a much more collaborative way with teachers and researchers, and in the case of the ones I've been involved in, other key educational stakeholders. So to conclude, I want to return to the question that I was asked to address. How then does research and inquiry contribute to the professional development of teachers? In terms of what we've seen, it provides a way for teachers to investigate new strategies and initiatives And I think the key thing there is when they see it makes a difference to moving forward with learning and teaching in their own classroom, it enables that sense of critical questioning learning and teaching in their own classroom and gathering the evidence to help develop what is going on, either their own teaching or those of their pupils. And you can see the relationship in terms of the presentation, where the professional dialogue and the inquiry and the research is part of that notion of teachers as professionals, being able to look at educational problems and explore them from themselves. So the sense of teachers as knowledge creators in relation to research and inquiry. And I've seen that confidence build in the teachers I've worked with around their own self-esteem, in feeling that they are able to have agency in making professional judgments and having evidence that is informing their decisions and their professional judgments in what they're doing. It allows them to look at the changing context of their own classrooms to be able to meet the diverse needs of the learners that they are working with. Thank you, and I look forward to any questions in the panel discussion that we have. Thank you.